Most of the time, we are heartbroken when a character bites the dust against our expectations. Even in the edgiest psychological thriller or dour crime drama, there's nothing worse than the wasted investment of donating a few hours of our lives to a hero, only for them to end up on the mortician slab as the credits roll. Even worse is when a great villain falls victim to a lame, inconsequential death, with their out-of-character demise sapping them of any threat that came before. Even if it's only a minor victim in a movie with an impressive body count, a dumb movie death pulls us out of the moment and wastes audience goodwill, ending the suspension of disbelief and leaving fans uninterested in the fate of the rest of the cast. A handful of the films on this list may manage to salvage themselves and still be seen as classics, but still, they are home to the deaths which left us face-palming instead of covering our eyes. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for Whatculture, here with the 10 dumbest ways movie characters got themselves killed. Number 10, 28 days later, animal rights protesters release rage monkeys. We can't speak for the political opinions of director Danny Boyle and screenwriter Alex Garland, creators of the intense, bloody brilliant hyperkinetic zombie flick 28 Days Later. But what can be said is that if any animal rights group in real life were ever as idiotic as the ones depicted in this film, then their protests would never even make it to the public before they blundered into their inevitable demise. The animal rights group seen at the beginning of the film see fit to get the plot going via releasing a set of apes who have been infected with an extremely contagious, deadly and dangerous strain of virus simply named Rage. Cheery moniker, what could go wrong? In fairness to the creators, the animal rights group are not the only ones depicted as absolute clowns in this bizarre opener, as the scientists urging them to stop warn them that they've got rage, as if the virus is a well-known contagion like malaria or Ebola, and the sentence isn't just a silly non sequitur which would do nothing to deter them from their dumb decision. Number 9. Evil Dead. Eric ignores the Necronomicon warning signs. 2013 remake of Sam Raimi's iconic 80s horror Evil Dead was a surprise smash upon release, managing to win over almost all critics, audiences, and existing fans alike by jettisoning the humour which came to define the series' later installments, and its eventual television spin-off Ash vs. Evil Dead, and focusing instead on raw, unremitting terror. The film is a gory, intense journey into a dark, demon-infested woods from which no one gets out without losing their life or at least a handful of limbs in the process. As such, no character felt safe during its tight runtime, and resourcefulness and ingenuity were little use against the film's unrelenting undead antagonists. Despite this atmosphere, hanger-on Eric's behaviour still stands out as some incredibly dumb shenanigans. Coming across a clearly cursed book and deciding to leaf through it is one thing, but Eric spots something stuffed in a bin bag and wrapped in barbed wire, immediately opens it, realises the tome is bound in human hide, and proceeds to start reading. At which point he encounters warnings about not reading its contents aloud, which he then proceeds to do. It's hard behaviour to relate to, Eric. That's all we're saying. Number 8. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. The hunter becomes the clueless. Wheatley was never the brightest villain in the Jurassic Park franchise, an amoral and greedy antagonist who double-crosses our heroes and leaves them to die the second they outlive their usefulness. So it would have been nice, given the film's long runtime, to at least fit in a satisfying demise for the brutal a-hole. Unfortunately, that death came in a form which begged disbelief even for an audience praying to see him get his just desserts. When Wheatley stuns the Indoraptor, a genetically engineered perfect predator designed to outsmart any animal or human foe, he then hops inside its cage to yank out a single tooth for his trophy collection. Because, you know, playing dead is so complicated that only incredibly intelligent animals such as possums can do it, and a lab-designed super monster could never withstand more than 1 or 2 stun darts, right? No prizes for guessing the fate of the hunter who walks into a vicious wild animal's cage under the assumption that it's sleeping, and then tries to forcibly extract one of its teeth. Number 7. Inglourious Basterds. Not doing thorough fingering research. Considering how key the undercover element of the central plot in Inglourious Basterds is supposed to be, it's remarkable how easily it all falls apart simply because a supposedly experienced intelligence officer can't count properly. Or at least can't count properly in German. Michael Fassbender's performance as Lieutenant Archie Hycox is the domino that topples the entire plan as his strange German accent alerts nearby Nazi officers when he meets his contact German film star Brigitte von Hammersmark. I mean, you'd think they could have done this in private, but that's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue comes when Hicox orders 3 glasses and uses the American way of showing 3 on his fingers rather than the European. That sort of knowledge of German mannerisms should probably have been top of his list of research, but his one foul up gets almost everyone in the tavern killed and the bastard's plan derailed completely. Number 6. Arachnophobia. Idiot expert ignores his expert knowledge. Arachnophobia was a thrilling return to classic monster movie mayhem upon its release in 1990, with a simple premise: man meddles with nature and a load of 8-legged threats flood an unsuspecting small town in middle America as a result. That said, Dr. James Atherton, an animal expert whose search for these creepy crawling creatures sets the plot in motion, must be the dumbest doctor in cinema history, and no amount of residual goodwill from actor Julian Sands can ameliorate this. Sorry, Merchant Ivory's room with a view. Upon uncovering the huge infested spider's nest which houses the locus of the film's threat, Dr. Atherton sees fit to hop up on a wobbly half-rotten ladder and jump into the belly of the beast. The good doctor begins poking around inside the massive web structure, which he knows houses innumerable highly poisonous arachnids wearing absolutely no protective equipment in the process. I mean, what did you expect was going to happen? Number 5. Full Metal Jacket. The drill sergeant bullied too far. Admittedly, almost everyone in Kubrick's cold, clinical Vietnam War drama is guilty of thoughtlessness during the film's punishing runtime. Some are peer pressured or suffer to the point of a psychotic break, yes, but plenty end up running straight into sniper fire due to misguided ideas of heroism. It's undeniable that the horrors of war leave the entire cast so broken that their decisions are rooted less in abject ignorance and more in a collective abandonment of hopes, ideals, and morals. Dumb ways to get killed is practically the purpose of the film. Except in the case of R. Lee Ermey's iconic drill sergeant, whose demise is almost laughably idiotic even when the film's dour and bleak message is taken into account. After months of torturing the tragic Private Gomer Pyle, Ermey's sergeant awakens to find him sitting alone in a bathroom during the dead of night, armed and laughing manically. The private is a crack shot, the sergeant is unarmed. How does he defuse the situation? Why, by returning to abusing the private, of course. The gambit pays off as well as you'd guess. Number 4. Child's Play. Dr. Death lives up to his name. Now, if you understand how to harness the dark magic of voodoo, maybe there's an obscure reason to teach it to a violent serial killer and all-around scumbag like Charles Lee Ray, despite the fact that he's played by bad guy extraordinaire Brad Dourif. At least that's the only plausible explanation for why John Dr. Death Bishop offered his 12-week explainer on voodoo religion to the villain of 1988's classic killer dolls slasher flick, Child's Play. The first installment in the long-running and still-going franchise sees pint-sized terror Chucky torture Dr. Death for further information on voodoo after reincarnating himself as a children's doll. How does a doll torture a fully grown man? Well, that would be pretty easy when said man teaches him voodoo, makes a voodoo doll of himself, and then tells the serial killer where he hides it before then refusing to help him. Genius work, Dr. Death. It's a medical marvel that you didn't live up to your name earlier with that brilliant brain. Number 3. Unfriended. Trying to use a gun on a ghost. As surprisingly solid as the screen-bound, Skype-based scare ride Unfriended was, it wasn't without its sillier moments. The first that comes to mind may be the infamous Death by Blender and Death by Hair Straightener sequences, but both are novel murder methods, so let's get further ahead. Less understandable is the fate of Adam, a smarmy, privileged habitual liar and bully. It was always inevitable that Adam was going to meet a grisly end from the moment he appeared on screen, which makes it all the more inexcusable that his death came in the form of him waving around a loaded gun in order to threaten an unseen ghost who had already proven they were capable of manipulating both computers and the aforementioned electronics. If you can guess what happens when he threatens an already dead person with a gun after they've turned household appliances into lethal weapons, congratulations, you're sharper than the now deceased Adam. Number 2. Scream. Doggy door death. Playing the snarky but likeable best friend of final girl Sydney Prescott and girlfriend of, surprise Sydney, mass murderer Stu, Rose McGowan as Tatum offers up a fair fight when the killer comes for her. At first, it's a tense sequence. Tatum gives an impressive but believable athletic display which sees her floor the clumsy Ghostface with some well-placed beer bottle tosses. And the tension of the scene rises as it becomes more and more likely that Tatum may subvert genre rules and prove resourceful enough to escape the clutches of death. You know, until she opts to climb out of a garage using the doggy door instead of just pulling the door open or using the switch. How can you be sure the switch works? Well, because the masked murderer immediately triggers it to send her to a gruesome, though not particularly believable, demise. Number 1. Pet Sematary. Lewis learns nothing from 2 revivals. What happens when you take a novel famous for its slow, thoughtful, and challenging meditation on parenting, grief, loss, and mortality, and condense it down into 100 minutes of possibly unintentional dark comedy? Well, character motivation can tend to fall out of the window along with believability. The issue, however, obviously wasn't too big a concern for horror director Mary Lambert when she signed on to adapt Stephen King's Pet Sematary. Make no mistake, the recent remake also has its own struggles with believability, but by the time that the original film's ending comes around, it's difficult not to stare at the screen in disbelief. Small-town physician and all-round clown Lewis is father to a pair of adorable tykes and husband to a loving wife. When he discovers the titular animal graveyard can return anything dead to life, he decides, despite the advice of both real people and imagined ghosts, to give it a whirl. First, it's a cat which turns feral and vicious, solid start, and then a son who comes back as a murderous toddler. Said toddler proceeds to kill his mother, Lewis's beloved wife, which then prompts Lewis to revive her with the same cemetery. 2 guesses how the gambit works out for him?